Coming to you from iconic Studio A at Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs. It's time for the Gardening Simplified radio, podcast, and YouTube show with Stacy Hervella, me, Rick Weist, and our engineer and producer, Adriana Robinson. Well, the trees are going to take some much-deserved time off, and we will benefit. Fall color. My favorites have always been maples and dogwoods, Itea and Fothergia. Witch hazel's a favorite of mine, and of course, ginkgo. I love ginkgo trees. Viburnum, serviceberry, oak leaf hydrangea, and many more as favorites for fall color. And there's many great choices. As a matter of fact, Stacy, I think I have a new fall color favorite, Kodiak Orange Durvella.
Oh, great choice.
It's
such
fabulous.
A great plant.
Just beautiful. And also Spice Girl, Korean Spice Viburnum. That would be Viburnum carlesii, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Nailed it. I'm hot already. It's a standout choice for adding spectacular fall color to your landscape. And we love our fall color. It's a magical time of the year. One of my favorite fall color spots is Lake of the Clouds. It's in the Porcupine Mountains Wilderness State Park in Michigan, way up there in the UP. You can see the fall color from dramatic cliffs. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see some of the pictures that I took, or we'll put them in our show notes. But Stacy, everybody has their favorite fall color spot, I would think.
I mean, I don't.
No?
I don't. I wouldn't say that I have one particular spot because it's kind of just like wherever I'm going.
Yeah.
But I do have a favorite fall color tree.
You do?
Oh, yeah. Sugar maple.
Yeah, it's got to be sugar maple.
Got to be sugar maple.
The star of Northeast U.S., the color is sugar maples, and the backbone of New England's stunning fall foliage. And they're talking about its distribution possibly moving further north due to climate change over the next century. So that would be, let's see if I get this right, Stacy, Acer saccharum?
That's correct.
Close enough?
Yes, and not to be confused, even though this is very confusing, with Acer saccharinum, which is the silver maple. I don't know why taxonomists did this to us. They must hate us. So Acer saccharum, sugar maple, good. Acer saccharinum, silver maple, bad.
Got it. Well, I love sugar maples. I mean, think about maple syrup. And of course the fall color, but its claim to fame actually because of its tight grain and light color. It's the kind of wood that makes up 29 of the 30 NBA hardwood basketball courts. That's what they make basketball courts.
I did not know that. That is interesting.
Yeah, so there you go. Now it's somewhat automated. Did you see what I did there?
I read it first, so I had a little head start.
I know, I had it here in my notes. The timing of color production is quite consistent from year to year, although unusual weather patterns can affect it, diminish, or advance timing. Of course, this past year we dealt with some drought. We want sunny days and chilly nights to get the anthocyanins. That's the red color. I mean, I think it's pretty predictable. We're going to get great yellows and oranges, but that anthocyanin pigment creates the reds, and if we get rainy and windy weather, it could affect the color. Okay, so we're looking for sunny days and chilly nights, and that will bring out that pigment. Of course, we love anthocyanins. Anthocyanins are found in lots of foods like blueberries and grapes, supposed to be really good for you. You can get your anthocyanins from a good glass of red wine, so it's a great fall color.
Thank goodness for the anthocyanins.
I love it. Now, chrysanthemums are to fall what turkeys are to Thanksgiving. Fall combinations now have become very, very popular, and I've been hearing of more and more people, for example, using supertunias in fall combinations because petunias are somewhat light frost tolerant. So it's a great a great thing to do. And I like fall color in my perennials too. Heucheras, like the Dolce Toffee Tart and Fall in Love Sweetly Japanese anemones. I love Japanese
anemones are so pretty. They can be a bit rambunctious, but if you put them in the right spot and they don't really make a pest of themselves, you're so grateful for them because those flowers are so unbelievably pretty, so abundant. I mean, it's like a no-brainer kind of plant if you've got the right spot for it.
You're right, rambunctious. They have a rhizotomous type of root. They look delicate, but they're very, very tough. And who needs friends when you've got anemones?
Well, you'll need friends because you're going to want to split them up and share them and spread the wealth around. So you will need friends, in fact.
There you go. And I love autumn crocus. It's not a true crocus.
Oh, yeah.
It's colchicum, a group of fall flowering bulbs in the lily family. Other names for these plants include meadow saffron, naked lady, and, of course, colchicum.
Well, colchicums are really such an amazing plant because they're not a color that you expect to see in fall. They have this like really crazy pastel kind of color. But the trick with colchicums, especially coming off the heels of our bulbs show, is that they are fall planted fall bloomers.
Yes.
So most things that are going to bloom later in the season, you're planting in spring, like lilies and that kind of thing. Whereas colchicum, you're only going to find it in the fall. You're going to plant it, it's going to flower, and then it puts out this really ugly foliage in the spring that gets super ratty looking, but you got to put up with it, but it's worth it because when that comes back in fall, and that's why they call them naked ladies, is because there was nothing, and then all of a sudden you go out one morning and there's this purple flower, and you're like, what? I totally forgot I planted this. They're an amazing thing, but they are a plant, I think, for savvier gardeners who know to look for them and to plant them in fall. So kind of a little tricky little trick there to enjoying good colchicums.
And in fall, like you said, blooming with, I'm going to call it Easter colors.
Yes.
In fall. And yes, if you can find them, sometimes in garden centers, you'll find them blooming on display.
Right, yeah.
If they haven't been cared for or cooled properly. But certainly a great plant to add to your landscape. So
Can I say something else interesting about colchicum?
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't realize this, but a chemical derived from colchicum, colchicine, is the original plant mutator chemical that they use to induce mutations in plant breeding. So there's been a lot of changes since then, but it was really the extract from colchicum that was one of the first things they could treat seed and so forth with to try to induce the mutations that would bring about new colors, new forms, all that kind of stuff.
That's fascinating. That is really cool. Well, we get inspired by fall color, and I get inspired to write a limerick. So here it comes, whether you're ready or not. Colors that compel, a visual groundswell. Fall color is the buzz. We love it just because. Fall's well that ends well. So growing season, goodbye. The winter season's nigh. So start the coffee debate. Pumpkin flavor to celebrate? Nope. No more Mr. Spice Guy. I'm not into pumpkin spice. Are you? Do you like pumpkin spice?
I like the spices that accompany that kind of thing. But no, I do not wish to have pumpkin in my coffee.
Yeah, same here. Same here. All right. Well, for more color in fall, of course, we appreciate and enjoy asters. I mentioned before, mums and asters are just like mums. I believe it's important to set on your schedule to pinch those guys in spring into early summer so they're shorter, squattier, and full of flower in fall. Pansies and violas, of course, crab apples and their fruit. Wow, what great fall color. And, of course, dogwood fruit also. Now, with pansies, remember, the roots cannot absorb water from frozen soil, so they will overwinter. But I have found that pansies perform really well in the north where we get snow cover.
Yep.
When you don't get snow cover, sometimes you can lose the pansy beds because that snow is,
I think they
insulated.
just dry out, yeah.
Yeah, it's insulating for the pansies. So there's many wonderful ways to add great color. And, of course, we have ornamental kale and cabbage, Swiss chard, a variety of plants. And, again, Stacy, I see more and more in garden centers and greenhouses, combination planters. I'm seeing more of that instead of just chrysanthemums.
Yeah, and you know what else has become really popular over the last several years is the ornamental hot peppers.
Yes.
Those are very cool to see because those bring a lot of color. And people always say, can I eat them? And I mean, the answer to that is, I guess, if you want. They're not usually developed for flavor. So a lot of times, what's the breeding goal? These were developed for color in containers. They might not be the tastiest pepper. They might be extremely hot. They might be extremely mild. But yes, in theory, if you are sure that it is a pepper and not, I don't think they even sell those Jerusalem cherries anymore. Remember those back in the day?
That.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's a long time ago.
Oh, boy. Nightmares.
But that's another new cool thing that you see around.
We'll see what colorful plant Stacy has to share with us in Plants on Trial. That's coming up next here on the Gardening Simplified Show.
Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show, where the order of the day is fall color. You're seeing it, we're seeing it. You can't go anywhere without seeing it. And, of course, you've got flowers. We haven't talked a lot about flowers that are colorful in fall. But, one thing when you're talking about mums and asters and all of that in the previous segment, are you familiar with the perennial Sheffield mums?
Sheffield mums. I've heard of it, not familiar.
Yeah, so they are a fall perennial. This is not today's plant on trial, but I did want to get this out because you were talking about like how people over winter try to grow their regular decorative mums as perennials. And in many cases that is possible. I think that increasingly a lot of the varieties that they are selling at the market are just not suited to growing year round. So people try to overwinter these things, grow them permanently in their garden, and it is possible. But Sheffield mums are true perennials. And they have like a daisy kind of shape, a pale pink, kind of nice, almost fern-like foliage, and the most beautiful fragrance. And these are true perennials that will actually spread quite nicely in your garden. And this is another one, like when we were talking about bulbs, when we were talking about fall berries, these are plants that typically suffer from the fact that they don't look like much when the majority of people are in the garden. So it's a good idea to take note of these things now. And in fact, you might still be able to get them in the garden center because now they're like, well, people might actually buy these since they're covered in flowers. But I would say Sheffield mums are a perennial that you should definitely keep an eye out for and consider adding to your garden if you're looking for more flower color in fall in your garden. See, they're nice, yeah?
Yeah, they're nice, and I just looked them up. They're very nice, and you can buy them in a lot of places. So,
they just deserve, it's just one of those things like the culture. You just need to know that they're out there and know what you're looking for. So we've talked about flowers, we've talked about colorful fruit in fall, we've talked about colorful foliage because, of course, that's what gets all the credit when it's fall.
I think it was mum-believable, yes.
But, one thing that we don't really talk about is evergreens, broadleaf evergreens getting color, because we talk about fall foliage and what's happening, of course, is that the plant is taking all of that chlorophyll. It's been using the chlorophyll to make energy and sugars all season long. And, the shorter days are triggering that to stop. So it translocates all of that chlorophyll, stores all that energy to help it get through winter. And that unmasks all the pigments that were there all along. So the fall color is there under the green all season long. And then the green goes away and you see these amazing colors. But that's not the only way that foliage can change color, because the cooler temperatures, the shorter days, also trigger color change in some broadleaf evergreens.
I'm glad you brought that up. Let me quickly ask, PJM rhododendron, would you agree that's great fall color?
Yeah, PJM rhododendron is an evergreen, and it turns purple, like a deep purple that can be quite interesting. Now, I think that it tends to be best if you set it off with something brighter. A lot of those really dark colors, sometimes they just become kind of a black hole in the garden. But like imagine pairing that with something like Amsonia hubrichtii, which is like that yellow, and it turns yellow, really fine thread-like foliage in fall, just beautiful. So there are these other ways that fall color can develop, and you will certainly see that in today's plant on trial, which is Tres Amigos abelia.
Wow, that plant is a chameleon.
It is kind of a chameleon, and not like that bad chameleon plant that we've been talking about a bunch this summer.
Right.
Totally different. You don't have to worry about this one taking over your garden. Tres Amigos, as you might be able to guess by the name, three friends, is really a bunch of different colors at once. It is a variegated abelia, so under normal circumstances throughout the summer, the foliage is just going to be a nice, tidy kind of mint green and white variegated. And I know variegation, of course, can be very polarizing. Some people like it, some people don't. Yep. I do think this is one of those variegations that is quite neat and tidy, so people do tend to like it. And in spring, again, when the days are shorter and the temperatures are cooler, as well as in fall, this plant turns all sorts of colors. You really have to see it to believe it. So most notably, what you're going to notice is that the top of the new growth turns a bright pink. So that variegation maintains. It's just that the white turns a really pretty pink and just completely lights up the plant. And then as that starts to age, what happens is that's turning yellow and orange. And so that white margin is all lit up in all of these different colors. Now that goes away during the heat of summer when the days are the longest and the weather is the warmest. But again, in spring and fall, you get this amazing development of color like you really haven't seen. And that pink color, it's very similar to what's happening with panicle hydrangeas later in the season too. It's just bringing about these changes in the plant cells that let these colors flourish. And I think people don't really, consider that you can have an evergreen that's still actually kind of colorful in fall.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah,
I guess that's why I call it a chameleon. I mean, that would be right. Right?
Yeah. So you'll certainly see pictures of this, of course, if you're joining us on YouTube, or you can go to our show notes at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com and see pictures of this because it is something that you really are going to want to see for yourself. Now, I talked about abelia a couple months ago when we did our dog show. Our show all about dogs, because abelia is a very tough plant, and I think it's an especially underappreciated plant. Okay. Now, partly it's because most abelias, and Tres Amigos is no exception here, are more warm or mild climate plants. Tres Amigos is hardy down to USDA Zone 6, heat tolerant through USDA Zone 9. We have no problem growing it whatsoever here in Michigan. In the cooler end of its range is going to be semi-evergreen, which means that it's going to keep pretty much just the leaves at the tips of the branches, and the inner leaves will fall off and be replaced next year. In milder areas than that, it will be completely evergreen, and you will enjoy this color change really probably all through winter, clear until next spring, due to those cooler temperatures and shorter days. But what abelias are great foliage plants, but I think that the flowers are especially something that deserves more attention. Now, I have a hardy abelia in my garden. It's a variety that we used to offer through Proven Winners called Ruby Anniversary. The thing has been flowering now for a solid 2.5 months. The flowers are extremely fragrant, and they attract butterflies, hummingbirds, and bumblebees. Like, they are just flocking to this thing. Now, with a plant like Tres Amigos, because you have this variegated foliage, a lot of times those flowers just get lost because the flowers on Tres Amigos are white. They're a really nice, pure white. And because it's a variegated plant, they're not popping out of the foliage.
Yeah, and let me ask you real quickly, with the white flowers, to you, does it smell like jasmine?
You could
Kinda
probably
like
say that.
jasmine?
I would say it's like one of the closest corollaries to it. Okay. It's definitely like a light floral scent. I would say if I had to compare it to any other flowering plant, that would probably be like the closest.
Okay. But that's why pollinators love it.
Yeah, they do. Okay. And that's what's really cool about this is you don't necessarily see the flowers, but you'll smell the flowers and you will see all of this activity being attracted to the flowers. And so it's just kind of like a fun little feature. And I like personally that abelia is not one of those plants that just like has its moment where it's just covered in flowers and then nothing. Like, there's something to be said for that. You should definitely have those plants in your garden. But you should also have plants like abelia that just kind of like always have flowers on them from everywhere from like June until frost. Because it's really never without some flowers. It's never like that stop you in your tracks and, can't believe what you're seeing, but it's just consistently flowering. I like that like reliability. It's something you can turn to and is going to look really, really great. Tres Amigos abelia comes to us from Mignet Nurseries in France, where abelia tend to be a lot more popular and even treated almost as like a gift plant. So especially like these foliage abelias, They will sell them at garden centers in colorful little pots that, kind of complement the foliage, and just use them as a tabletop decoration.
Yeah, that's great.
Here we need to, we got to dig a big hole in the yard and plant your abelia. We haven't quite adapted that mentality. Usually if we're like, hey, this is a shrub, I'm going to want to plant this in my garden. I want it to be with me for the rest of my life, and I need to be successful with it. So it kind of has that novelty feature that has, something that you just want to buy as an impulse item, as well as really fantastic presence in the landscape.
But if I'm going to plant it and have it with me the rest of my life, are the deer going to eat it?
The deer are not going to eat it. So abelia is very deer resistant. The deer have never touched my ruby anniversary, and I think that tends to be true of the rest of the abelias. Their foliage they don't have like a bad smell or, hairs or thorns or any of those things that normally deter deer, but the foliage is kind of glossy and leathery, and so maybe they just don't like that. It's not toxic. I don't really know exactly what it is that they don't like it for, but I will take it because I'm not going to question. They can go eat all the toxic taxus that they want and leave the non-toxic abelia alone. That's win-win for us as gardeners. So like I said, this is going to be hardy down to USDA Zone 6, heat tolerant through USDA Zone 9, definitely going to benefit from some mulch because it has shallow roots. If you are in Zone 6, I would recommend adding this to your spring planting list rather than trying to plant it now. But if you're in Zone 7 through 9, definitely plant it now. It's going to reach 2 to 3 feet tall by about 3 to 5 feet wide. So a nice front of the border, front of the landscape plant for just some great color that you don't really have to do anything at all to enjoy. So check out our pictures at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com or on YouTube. And if you are interested in adding Tres Amigos abelia to your garden or landscape, make sure you let your local garden center know. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, we're opening up the garden mailbag, so please stay tuned. Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified show, where one of the ways we try to simplify gardening for you is by answering your gardening questions. And you can send those to us at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. You just go there. There's a contact us form, and you can even send us pictures if you're dealing with something that we're going to need to see photos of, which is always helpful. I don't know how they used to help people garden before digital cameras. I have no idea how that worked.
They sketch stuff out on a napkin.
They just kind of use their psychic powers or something. I don't know. But we can definitely get you better information if you can send us a photo. We'll also still have time to send us a Halloween horror story if you have one. A Halloween garden horror story. Could be anything. So far, we've got some interesting ones. Nothing involving, ghosts or body parts. So, but yet there's still a chance that you could send it to us. So you can also just do that through the contact form at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com.
Ooh, you never know what you're going to dig up.
You never do. I mean, you really don't.
Yeah.
Usually for me, it's just like pieces of glass and broken dishes living in an old house, but you never know.
Well, of course, in Europe, you hear all the time people digging up bombs.
Oh, yeah, bombs and
World War II, and
old ruins and entire cities. And, usually we don't have anything quite like that here, but hey, let us know if you did. So do reach out to us if you have a garden horror story to share, or you just want to ask us a question. So what's our first question?
That was really interesting on abelia. I have a question for you to start, and that is, why do lizards tell great jokes? Because they're stand-up chameleons. Okay, here we go.
I was like, scales, tail, a knoll, iguana.
Stand-up chameleon. Okay, question from Vicky. Any ideas on why the squirrels are going crazy this year? We've noticed frantic digging by at least one squirrel in our yard. The front yard is half torn up. The backyard, one area mainly, but holes everywhere. Plus, we've observed this every day, all day. One morning, just before it was fully light, I saw a squirrel digging up the area in my backyard. That's the worst. And this behavior has been observed throughout the day and into the early evening. Is this a sign of extreme weather? Is it one crazy, maniacal OCD squirrel? Wow.
Yeah. So,
and I've observed this.
And I have too, although I would say for myself, I don't think that the squirrels seem to be acting any more maniacal than they do every fall. my neighborhood squirrels, they're like, yesterday I saw a squirrel sitting in the middle of the street eating a nut. And I'm like, dude, you're in the middle of the street. Will you please move?
They're crazy.
Like, I got to eat this thing right now. But yeah, I mean, I think it all just is a matter of what you're seeing and when you're seeing them. And of course, of the food supply, because the more food that they have, the more they're going to try to bury because they're trying to stockpile it all. And of course, squirrels are quite territorial. So I guess it also depends on how much they're out competing their fellow squirrel. Now, in my neighborhood, I have several walnut trees. And they love burying those walnuts.
They do.
And that takes a pretty big hole.
Walnuts and, of course, oaks. Now, I interviewed once a science writer from USA Today, and he explained to me, he had written a book, and he explained to me that a squirrel's mental capacity actually expands in fall. I think it was the hippocampus or whatever, a 15 or 20% increase because they've got to store away these nuts. And I still believe, because when I watch them, they rub it on the side of their head and then they put it in the ground. I think they put their scent on these nuts that they put in the ground. But last year was a mast year. And I think these squirrels just innately understand that, it was feast last year. Odds are it's going to be famine next spring. Let's do a lot of storage. And I think that's why they're digging like crazy.
Well, plus the term mast year is most typically associated with oaks, but there are other trees that have banner years of fruits. And so certainly if you have walnuts or other things that they dig and bury that are having a banner year, then they're just going to have more to bury. And that's just preparation. And, the same thing happens with chickadees. That's part of Douglas Tallamy's work, is that chickadees, their brain enlarges so that they can remember where they stored all of those little seeds and stashed them in trees and so forth. But I wonder what the squirrels think when they dig it up and they're like, oh crud, this was Brad's nut that he buried. Brad's a jerk. I don't want to get in his way, and they're like, better not touch this one. I'll go find one that I buried. I don't know. I wonder what goes on in that big squirrel
many
brain.
Questions. I mean, think about how black walnuts stain your deck or stain your driveway, and what does it do to squirrels' teeth? I mean, man,
that's a good question.
I mean, there's so many things that come to mind. We better just move along.
We should. We could have this conversation all day.
We heard from 2 listeners that have the same symptoms on 2 different trees. Drew writes about his Venus dogwood in Toronto. Donna writes about her Temple of Bloom heptacodium in Oklahoma. Both plants show the same damage. Very brown, very crispy leaf edges with a touch of still healthy green in the center. What's going on?
Yeah, I thought this was interesting that they both came in around the same time. 2 different trees with, as you'll see on YouTube or in our show notes at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com, the damage on both plants looks the exact same.
Yes.
And there's a simple answer, and it's drought stress. And basically what's going to happen when a plant starts to experience severe drought stress is, of course, the leaf edge has a lot of potential for water loss in it. And it's also the furthest point from the roots. So it's where the water is going to basically stop flowing, first. That's where they're going to start to dry out. They don't start to dry out from the center out. They start to dry out from the outer edge in. And I think another important thing to remember about trees, especially and drought stress, is that the damage actually may have occurred months prior. Just because it's finally manifesting itself does not mean that the damage is happening, recently. That's often the case with plants that wilt. Okay. And trees do wilt. I mean, if you are familiar with a tree, you can kind of tell when it's, stressed and wilting. But I'd say for the average person, they don't say, whoa, that tree is, really, really wilting. That's an immediate response. But a lot of this browning, it can be cumulative. It can be due to many, many weeks of dry weather. And remember too, even if you're watering it, sometimes there's competition from neighboring trees. There's a lot of reasons why this could happen. But my advice of fixing it would be to, provide supplemental water. Both of these trees are fairly young as well. So they're going to need a lot more water than an established tree because their root systems aren't fully developed yet. And mulch those babies. That will help conserve so much water.
Yeah, it's a great point that it doesn't happen overnight. And when I look at the pictures, I see other plants surrounding the trees that have different water needs. And people have to be reminded that with these trees, just a trickle watering for a few hours, a deep watering, it brings up that old argument, frequent light or deep infrequent. And in the case of a tree, I say deep infrequent. The other thing, as far as mulch is concerned, there's existing mulch there, stir it. By the time we get into August, September, long season, that mulch becomes compacted, almost hydrophobic. Stir it. Make sure that the water is getting down to the roots.
You know, and another great thing, you see these around, especially like in municipal tree plantings, but the tree gators, those green bags that you see zipped around new tree plantings, if you're not familiar with them, they are basically a waterproof bag with kind of a pressure sensitive tape on the bottom that when you fill it up, it just seeps out over a long period. And those are a very, very effective way to get especially young trees established. They don't look the best, of course, in your backyard when you have this beautiful tree, but you only need to use them for 2 or 3 years. And that can help a lot, just as long as, of course, you remember to fill the bag.
You bet. Callie writes to us, I have a peace rose I want to plant in the ground. I was away from home this week, came home to this white stuff on one branch. Do I cut off that branch or treat it? Callie lives in Northeast Texas, Zone 8.
Yeah, so I don't know for sure whether this is mealybug or scale. Most likely it looks like mealybug to me. Those are some big mealybugs. Even the mealybugs are bigger down in Texas.
Bigger in Texas.
Apparently. And, you know, it's not uncommon for something to just proliferate like this, especially in a warm climate.
Yes.
You know, where things could be moving along fine and like you seem to overnight have this suddenly appear. So, Callie, I would say absolutely cut that thing off. Throw it away, wash your hands because they're going to have like little eggs and so forth that you could easily spread. I mean, mealybug is not the worst that an outdoor plant can have, but if you can minimize, you know, what you're putting out in the garden and how much it spreads, your rose will certainly thank you. And roses, I don't find usually get mealybugs, so it is strange that this one seemed to explode so bad.
Yeah, that's true.
I've never seen one.
But it's just
like
on one stem,
right.
So I agree with you. Let's cut it out and move on.
Yep, and the rose will be fine. None the worse for the wear. So yeah, get that thing off, put it in the ground. And as in many cases, once something is in the ground, can spread its roots, it's getting more regular water, it doesn't have the stress of growing in a container, it will often be able to resist any of those pest infestations a lot more easily. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, we've got branching news, so please stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Gardening Simplified show. It's time for branching news. And Stacy, I thought this story is really interesting. The Tennessee Department of Tourist Development was the first to introduce Seacoast viewers. Now, C as in S-E-E, not S-E-A, Seacoast viewers, powered by Enchroma to enable colorblind visitors to see the changing colors in fall at 12 parks and scenic overlooks. Isn't that cool?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I wonder how that works.
Yeah, and it's fun to research it because they actually give you the opportunity to see fall colors the way they appear to someone who's colorblind, and then compare it to what you see through these viewers. So really neat. Virginia state parks are making autumn more vibrant also for everyone by installing these special viewfinders for colorblind visitors. They allow them to see the stunning shades of scarlet and gold that everyone else gasps at in October. These nifty viewfinders work magic for those with red-green CVD, making the autumn experience magical whether you're colorblind or not. That is very, very interesting. While people with normal color vision see more than 1 million hues and colors, that doesn't seem right to me. That's 1 million hues and colors? I'm going to have to research that. But the 350 million people in the world with color blindness only see an estimated 10% of them. As a result, their worldview is less vibrant and dull, and some colors appear muddled or indistinguishable. You know, we talked in segment 1 about fall colors, and I mentioned Porcupine Mountains here in the far north of Michigan in the UP, and standing on those cliffs and looking at those colors, usually early October, first or second week of October, it really, truly takes your breath away.
It is. It's something you really have to see to believe. And we've got some of the best fall color in the world here in the U.S. and Canada, of course.
Incredible. Stacy, you shared a story with me that I thought was really interesting, the invention of the modern chainsaw. Sometime shortly after the end of the Second World War, a logger named Joseph Buford Cox was out in the woods. Using his axe, he split open a stump and found it was full of timber worms, the 4-inch-long larva of the timber beetle. Joe took a minute to look the worms over as they continued to bore into the stump, trying to get away from him. Sawdust dropped away from their jaws in prodigious streams, and Joe watched them sink slowly into the stump. Some were going against the grain, cross-cutting. Some were going with it, ripping. All of them were going at it at about the same speed. Joe was watching a bunch of timber grubs practically falling through a stump, grinding their way through the way we picture a chainsaw today doing it. And Joe thought, well, maybe I can learn something about this that would lead to a better power saw. So back at his home in Portland, he set up a little experiment station in the basement, magnifying glass, some timber worms, and he inspected their teeth and noted they had a C shape. And that started the whole thing. He worked on a basic design of a timber worm's jaws and basically sketched out a cutting chain that looks similar to a motorcycle drive chain with a cutting tooth sticking out every few links. The cutting teeth were hook-shaped chisels that would bite into the wood and essentially carve the chips, and then he added a bump in the metal just in front of the chisel on each link, filing down the bump so he could control how big a bite each chisel took. And the rest is history. This is right around the mid to late 1940s. Launched his company, the Oregon Saw Chain Corporation, with a payroll of 4 employees. But boy, it took off from there. And now basically obviously the patents have expired, and so all kinds of chainsaws are made. But his bug chain is basically used in every chainsaw in operation today.
It's amazing, right? Getting that inspiration from nature. I sent you that after we were talking about the burrs and Velcro. Because another thing that was inspired by nature.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
The original inventor.
A website for you to check out, because I really enjoy this website, harvardforest.edu. We're going to put the link at the website, but it's just a great website for learning about research, fall colors, trees, whatever it may be. But a great website, harvardforest.edu. And I think a great time also to remind folks, because I have used this often, Stacy, if you can explain again, if there's a certain thing, maybe it's chainsaws or maybe it's chameleons that you're really, really interested in using your .edu.
Oh, yeah. So this is so helpful. You know, nowadays, of course, if you try to search something, who knows what you're going to get? And you want it to be reliable. You know, you need to have something that you can trust and isn't just, some blogger's random thoughts on a topic. So to get reliable results, you can just use this command. Type in your words that you're going to use, and then cite, SITE, .edu. And what that's going to do is limit all of your results to university websites. So I typically do this for plants. So I'm going to use a scientific name and that command. And then everything I'm getting is from a university website. But depending on what you're trying to find out, you might want to use like a .org website. So this will work with any type of website extension. If you live in a foreign country and you only want to see results that have your country's suffix in the URL, it works for that too. And it's just, the more information that comes online, the more important it is for all of us to be able to find information that is trustworthy quickly.
Exactly. It's great advice for researching information. Okay, Iceland's Farmers Association told the BBC that there were shortages of cucumbers. And farmers have been unable to keep up with spiraling demand for cucumbers. A Canadian TikTok creator whose viral cucumber salad recipes have received millions of views and shares, is being blamed for a shortage of the vegetable in Iceland, according to the BBC. TikTok creator Logan Muffet, who shares videos with his 6 million followers, started making cucumber salad content in July. He suspects his videos are popular because they're super simple, easy to follow, and fast recipes. So I think next spring in Iceland, there will be a lot of residents who plant maybe a few extra cucumber plants.
Well, it's very simple. They're one of the easiest vegetables to grow. So it's a good thing. But I can't believe that a Canadian vlogger single-handedly bankrupted Iceland of cucumbers. That's saying something. But yeah, everyone should grow cucumbers. They're so easy, and it's really nice to have cucumbers just outside your back door.
When there's a shortage, it's cucumbersome. That's what it is. So plant more cucumbers. Stacy, at this time of the year, also, as I enjoy taking leaves and doing some passive composting, active composting, using those leaves in my vegetable garden, I can't help it. Okay. Again, I got a few years behind me, and as a kid, it takes me back, and I just remember so vividly people raking the leaves to the curb, squirting some gas on them, and lighting them up, and having the smoke in the neighborhood in late October and November was so thick. I can't believe that we actually used to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think for people who are a little bit older, the smell of burning leaves is the smell that you associate with fall.
Yeah.
That is for me.
And it's just strange. And
strange.
As a kid, and dangerous, dangerous for many people. But as a kid too, those glowing embers of leaves, the sunsets, it's just a spooky haze. And as kids, we would take our bikes and we would ride our bikes through those burning piles of leaves. Yeah, I know, dumb. But we would. I've got a couple burn marks yet as mementos from that period. But yeah,
wait, why would you do that? Did it spark or do something cool, or you're just being daredevils? What's the appeal here?
Because the leaves are there, and you've got a bike.
Okay.
And you got a banana peel bike, and you ride as fast as you can, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. But just those memories are just unreal to me. I'm glad we do what we do today, and that is compost leaves in our garden.
Yeah, well, that, or I guess the invention of the lawn leaf bag.
There you go.
is completely changing. You do see people burn their leaves, especially out in the country. But especially if you have a very dry year like we've had in Michigan, or you talked about how dry it was in Ohio. That can be quite dangerous because, of course, they're dry and they go up very quickly and they can coast on the wind. And, it can definitely cause some serious issues.
Amazing. Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. And most of all, thanks to you watching on YouTube, listening on the radio, or listening to our podcast. We appreciate you and thank you for your support. Have yourself a great week.